Welcome to Brightly You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we share soul-driven advice and topics to help you live more brightly in mind, body, and spirit. Through sharing our experiences, friendship, and passions, we hope to impact you to step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Oh, have I got an experience for you? Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy. What's up?
First of all, if this is your first foray into our show, if you're a few behind, you have to go and listen to the episode Signs, just to fully grasp, because I'm not really going to I'm a storyteller, as those who have listened know. Okay.
Even if you have listened to Signs, I would listen
again. It's my favorite. Okay. So it's something I'm going through right now, happens to kind of really correlate along with our last episode, Fortune, and that was really about if the best way to know your future is to create it, so that's why the Science episode's a little tongue in cheek here. But, when you think of like Wheel of Fortune in general, the tarot card, or just like the concept of fate, something like that. I had something happen a few years ago that I totally thought was like, oh, this all makes sense now. And this is why this is happening. This is why this is happening. Amy, it didn't happen. And now it's changing. It's changing to such a degree that I don't think it's ever going to happen. But maybe not, right? Still looking driving around the neighborhood, looking at garbage can numbers for a sign. But it's been making me think about fortune in general. And where will my destiny take me, right?
Yeah.
If I have question. No matter how much action I do or don't take, where's it going to take me, right? Because it feels like fortune, in a sense, or my destiny is telling me to move or be moved. And I'm sitting here like a wall saying, hey, this is the first time in like my life I've ever felt this content. And granted, I've been here for 4 years in my contentment. Leave me alone. I'm not ready. I don't have an idea of where we're going yet. I don't want to get on the bus.
Okay. So do you feel like there's like this change like coming at you or trying to come at you, and there's no partnership in co-creating your future? Or what are you like, how are you thinking about that?
Yes, and both, and yes.
Okay.
So there's change happening around me.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, so quite literally, in the physical sense, I had a neighbor pass away. The neighbors on the other side of me are moving. The neighbors to the next to them, who I don't really know, but are part of my community, they just put their house on the market. I've heard the people next to them are putting their house on the market next month. Then we go, down to the other side. 2 more houses just went up for sale down there. Like, it's not just my immediate friends and close neighbors I'm losing my community, my neighborhood. Then, as you know, there's some changes going on at our employer that will most likely, or I'm anticipating, a domino effect of leadership changes as people move up or move on. And I'm just sitting here like, I love my house. I love my neighborhood. I love my job. I don't have I'm usually the one moving. I'm usually the one changing, and I'm usually the one creating that change. And I'm excited, and I know what it is, and I'm making it happen. And now I kind of feel like the universe is like, oh, time for change. And I'm so far behind. I did not do the reading. I don't have a plan in place. And I'm just like, if it doesn't feel like we're co-creating, I feel like the space is there for co-creation. But again, it's that move or be moved, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Especially when, a lot of times we talk about change, and we've talked about, even if it's something that we have initiated, it can be hard.
Yeah.
Or there's also the change that is like, your employer is saying you're going to work differently now. And that's a change directly affecting you and how you go about your day. But this change for you is a little different because you didn't initiate it. It's not directly like no one's saying to you, you have to move out of your house. We're building a
Exactly.
freeway here. But it is literally all around you. So it probably feels like a swirl. Now, oh, okay, just a, uh, not a spoiler alert or anything, folks, but we're talking about change today and resiliency with change. But that is so interesting because sometimes we also, so the other day I get these newsletters. I can't remember what it's called. It's like Monday's soul card reading or something. And pardon
Sounds
me, dear
mysterious.
person who sends it. And it seems so synchronistic because it was one of the cards pulled was on change, and it was actually called Blessed Change. And I was like, isn't that beautiful? And, a major life change brings you great blessings. And that's so beautiful to think of it like that. And so I got super excited about that. But as you're talking about the change that you're going through, it feels as if you have nothing, like you don't have control over the situation, of course, except how you react to it. However, like one of the last sentences in this newsletter that was sent to me is change ushers in fresh opportunities to learn, grow, prosper, and create new relationship. And so I feel like in your case, it could literally mean new relationship. Like somebody could move next door and you could become really good friends,
And
right?
I think that's the challenge now is I adored my neighbor who passed. And so I'm
Yes.
grieving her loss in many ways. But it was anticipated. She was 93.
Mm.
But then the other people on the other side, I do view them as friends. And
Yeah.
so I think I'm just seeing the loss. And it's not even that I'm anticipating, I mean, I'm aware of as a homeowner, but I'm not even anticipating like I'll get bad neighbors, but I do keep like my brain isn't focusing or won't allow me to be excited about this because it's right now it feels like loss and it
Yeah.
feels like something I have no control of. But it also just feels like, well, why aren't I changing? Like I'm really rooted.
Oh, that's so interesting to me that
Yeah.
that's like the key, one of the key things for you is like, why aren't I changing? Which that is so interesting. Do you feel like, is there something, because I know that you do kind of have, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but it feels like you have like, I'm usually this many years at a position and then I typically change. I'm usually this many years in a place that I live and then I typically move. And so you're in a position and a residency longer than you've ever been before.
Yeah. And well, I think that's where I'm not handling the change well or understanding, when I say the universe is like move or be moved, I don't think I physically need to move and I don't want to. Every time I've changed jobs before or changed residences, it wasn't so much timing, but a feeling, right? Like
Yeah.
I've talked about that before, just like feel,
Yeah.
just anticipating and finding this amazing job and then getting it, right? And I don't have that right now. And so it's so weird to me to be the one that stays. And it's
Yeah.
that co-creation piece you brought up where it's like, well, what change can I create? Because being stagnant's a risk too, right? Like, I don't want to
Mhm.
get too content. I don't want to get too bogged down and have moss be growing all over me, right? Like, that's for the later year in life, Tracy. That's way future Tracy.
yeah. Yeah. That's even future Amy, not even present Amy. One thing though that I really want to touch on is when you brought up the sense of loss. And I think that a lot of times we don't honor that when it comes to change, that there is a grieving, a literal grieving for your one neighbor, but will be a sense of loss with the neighbors right next to you as well, because you do view them as friends and a sense of loss of your community. And so I don't want to just like hop right into like, how can you become resilient in this change? I just want to make sure that people understand if you are going through change and you don't feel like you're in control of anything and you are feeling a loss, yes, do that. feel that loss.
There's a huge distinction there. So you talked about, the change we implement ourselves versus the change that happens. There's always a loss with change, but usually you're so distracted with the new, shiny, excited thing when you're initiating it that you don't have time to grieve, or it doesn't feel as heavy, right? Or you process it faster because you have a lot going on. Or sometimes you even grieve it before you realize the change is coming, and that's what initiated the change.
Oh, yes.
Right. But so for my case, all I have is the grief because the new hasn't happened yet. So on the one hand, she passed on May 2nd. They're maybe putting the house on the market this month, maybe not. It could be purchased and flipped to turn into a rental. It could be vacant for months. The house next to me, one half of the roommates is leaving pretty immediately here, but still not like a firm date. And then the other one isn't leaving till November, December. And so I just have this hanging knowledge that change is coming.
Oh, that's worse. I feel like if everybody just moved out and new people moved in, it would be like, it would suck. But then it's like, okay, now what are the steps forward?
All my prior changes usually happened so quickly. Like even buying this house was like a 28-day closing. Like it was.
Yes, it was so fast.
I talked to a realtor about maybe wanting to rent a house. And next thing I knew, I was signing some documents really excitedly, but it like no time to process. And so this is too much time to process.
It does feel like too much time to process. It feels like, So I'm wondering, with all this time to process, because sometimes, especially with this episode isn't on grief, but we are talking about grief. So with the death of someone, sometimes you want that time to process, right? But that's typically after, although sometimes before, like with my mom, she was in hospice. And so we had this expanse of time to kind of grieve, but we understood it's still different than what you're experiencing now. This sort of like, it might happen, it might not happen. That really feels like we keep referencing the Wheel of Fortune because that's the card that we just kind of used for this episode. It feels like that constant rotation, never stopping on one thing. So for you, what are you doing to try and mitigate any of these feelings? Are you doing anything? Have you thought of doing anything?
I mean, therapy, this.
I love it. So folks, if you want to build resiliency, go to therapy and start a podcast. The end.
Done. Thank you for coming to our show. If this episode spoke to your soul. So I think for me, for this change, and although I have a longer duration, this can apply to like any change that you didn't initiate, right? And you have to flow with at some point, right? or face a lot of loss in another area. But I feel like that Wheel of Fortune requires action. And I think where I'm frozen is I don't know what action to take yet. And so what I'm choosing to do right now is that aggressive friendship that I do in a lot of ways, in which I'm trying really hard to celebrate appropriately the people that I can that are leaving.
Yeah.
And so, I used to bake for these people. So when I found out the one was leaving right away, and I know he will cook and bake, I immediately wrote him a little goodbye card and all the recipe cards of all the recipes he's ever really made a big deal about.
That feels, I mean, okay, you call it aggressive friendship, but I think, first of all, it was an action you took. It was a generous action. It showed, it was also an action that meant something to both of you because you both like to do those things. So. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And then I'm just trying to find ways to, when we do get to interact, to really make the most of it. Right. Because we do get along really well, and we would call each other friends, but what we have in common is being neighbors. And so there's
Yes.
that chance for, I think also what I'm grieving is there could be an even bigger change of just never seeing them again, right?
Right.
Like that happens when you leave an employer, that eventually, as good of friends as you
Yeah.
were every day, you just might not talk to that person again. There's
Right.
recencies in lifetime, right? So I'm also trying to, find ways to do nice things, find ways to interact, find ways to let them know that I've appreciated them as
Mhm.
neighbors and friends, right? So just really putting it out there.
Yeah.
One of our longtime listeners, Darcy, who's a massage therapist and a healer that I recently went to, she encouraged me to put out into the universe and manifest the type of neighbors and community I want, which I hadn't even thought I had control. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm building this neighborhood up.
Yeah, you are.
We're
Talk
gonna be
about
the best part of this
co-creating.
neighborhood. No one's gonna
Yeah.
know it was me, but everybody who listens to this. But I'll take accountability for how kick-ass these
Yes.
people are gonna be.
Hello, neighborhood.
Right?
I am in charge.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what I want that to be. Which now that those other two houses went up for sale, I got to write that down. There's a full
You
moon coming
do.
up. Oh wait, don't manifest in the full moon. I got to the new moon. I got to the new moon. We're good. But so that's just, the other thing is just trying to remain optimistic, talking to people, and just continuing to enjoy what I have while I have it. So even though I know change is on the horizon, it's not here yet. Same with my boss. Like there's certain things I can do now so that if he were to take a new role someday, that I'm either ready to move up and like put my name in that position. I'm journaling and figuring out what I want that responsibility, signing up for trainings related to that. But then also just making sure that I'm really organized in my project management. So if I get a new boss, since they didn't pick me, that we can build that relationship up right away, right? Like, and just reminding myself,
Yeah.
I didn't pick either of these neighbors when I moved in. These guys moved in 3-4 months after me. And because of winter, we didn't really start interacting until like 7 months later. And so just reminding myself that like I got lucky once, I could get lucky again.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm really glad that you brought those things up about how you're dealing with it now, because it ties in. I do want to talk about resiliency
Yeah.
and how resilient people can move through change easier, which is a great, hey, that's a great statement. And if you're out there listening, you're like, that's great for resilient people. What about the rest of us? I'm here to tell you that people, you don't need to be born with resiliency. It is a fillable resource. It is something you can learn and attain. And gosh, you can Google, there's all kinds of different things out there, like 8 ways to be resilient. Here's 8 key factors in resilient people. But I think we wanted to talk just about like the things that we do. And so I'm glad you brought up aggressive friendship, because one of the things, of course, is a good support system. So not only you interacting with the neighbors that you still have right now, but also talking to your other friends about what's going to be happening,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So I think that's one of the key things. The fact that you were talking about like writing down what you want, and the fact that you're even talking about manifesting, to me, that feels like believing in a higher power, or something like that. If someone doesn't feel like they have faith in a higher power, like God, universe, whatever, like, do you ever talk to people about that? Like how they could maybe start feeling like there was something higher than them that they could call on? Or
So, and I mean, for the demographic that listens to this show, I kind of feel like if you don't have that, you might not have a name for it, but you might still have a feeling of it, right? Like
yeah.
whether it's a religion or a feeling or any one of those things you said,
Mhm.
people either tend to have it or intentionally don't. So the people that
Ooh,
don't,
intentionally don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like the agnostics and the atheists and things like that,
Hmm.
I don't think a higher power is a requirement for hope. And so
No.
those people, I would maybe recommend, okay, maybe instead of prayer, maybe have hope instead of despair, right? Like, I hope I get good neighbors. I hope for this type of person. I hope that these things occur.
Yeah. Or what about even just thinking like, okay, I'm going to have faith in the person I'm going to be 2 years from now to be living happily with their new neighbors or something like that. You don't have to believe in, I do think you can actually believe in yourself as well.
And I think one thing too, that helps with your mindset and your attitude is recognizing you do have a choice. So let's say it goes horribly, terribly bad, and I get in the most craziest of neighborhood wars with either one of them. I can move. I don't have the roadmap for that right now,
Yeah.
and I don't want to, so I'm not going to look into it. But I
Yeah.
do have choice in how I interact with them, my expectations of neighbors, right? So some people might be like, what's the big deal? Like, there's a lot of people in this neighborhood that have never introduced themselves, right? Never wave, never do anything. I share a driveway with one side, right?
Yeah.
There is some interaction. There isn't a full fence, right? Like there is, and we're like 15 feet apart. It's a very
Right.
close neighborhood of houses. But I think if you focus on what you can control, right? And so
Yeah.
right now, I'm making sure that my front yard is a reflection of the type of neighbor I am and want them to be, so that when they buy it, they see a neighborhood of homes that are well kept, right?
I love that.
That kind
Yeah.
of like attracts like, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I out in the country, I'm sure there are people that like dress up to try and scare away certain people, certain types, sit out on their front yard or whatnot and try and intimidate the people that they don't want to live there. I'm not going to take that route. I'm just going to try and attract what I do want.
Yeah. Yeah. So just like to get back to just like the resiliency piece of it,
Mhm.
if you're using aggressive friendship and also sort of like considering the manifesting thing,
Mhm.
um, would you consider like your meditation practice or yoga practice to also help in your resiliency bolstering?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's think about what the opposite of resiliency is. What does that look
Yeah.
like? It's probably anxiety, depression, hopelessness, despair,
Stuck, just
stuck,
completely frozen, stuck. Yes.
unsure what to do, unhappy, lack of joy, right? Because you feel like you're being forced upon. And so
Yes.
I think what we talk about a lot on the show around routine and ritual, affirmations, meditation, prayer, having a connection to something, even if it's nature, right? Like maybe you don't believe in a higher power, but you do like going in the woods. Like that's a connection
Yeah.
to nature, right? Connection to other people, socializing. All of those things are kind of front loading that resiliency for a good attitude. That's really
Right.
what resiliency
I
is.
feel and I feel like yes, resiliency is front loading for a good attitude. I also feel like resiliency, because you're not stuck, it does sort of open you up to possibilities, right? It doesn't close you off. If you're resilient, you're more likely to look at what could be possible, right? Um, and I feel like anything that you think helps you be resilient helps you be resilient, right? Whether it's gardening, whether it's, you know, I don't know, knitting every day, or meditating or praying or friendship or faith in something. If you think it makes you resilient, then it does.
And I think resiliency is something that can be cultivated.
Mhm.
When we talk about front loading it and building all this stuff, it helps with resiliency, right? It helps cultivate that. But some resiliency is just knowing I survived a thing I didn't want to, right? We're not even saying necessarily it made you better for it, right? Like that's not, I don't feel like people should have to be thankful for bad change that happened to them and they made
But
it
you can be thankful that you can recognize
that
that you
you did
survived
it.
it.
You survived
Yes.
it. You did it. You had it in you. So I think resiliency is just like that trust in yourself and your inner
Yeah.
guidance system. All that stuff that we've talked about, 73 episodes up until now, that like I can figure this out and I can make it what I want to be. The parameters might be limited given whatever the change in the situation is, but when you have a routine or a ritual, when you have that faith, whether or not your routine is a morning routine, an evening routine, something like that. Like I have a bit of neurodivergency, ADHD. Routines can be hard, but when you go through change, that's your constant, right? Like that's your North Star. Is the world around me is crazy, but my internal world is still okay because I have all these things that I do. And then if you external to that, your friends, your therapist, your external network, you're like the sun and they orbit around you, right? Like, and so you can draw them in when you need them, but you still kind of have to have your inner power to get.
Yeah. And I think that if you're faced with change, like the first thing is to just sort of, because sometimes we have a tendency to be like, what is this? Right. And so the first thing is to just like stabilize all your, little things inside your body by using one of your front loaded resiliency strengths, right? By just like, okay, let's just look at this situation. And I think that sometimes the reason why we react with change the way we do is because we hate the unknown, right? And then not only do we hate the unknown, we come up with all kinds of stories, horrible stories about what could happen after this unknown thing happens.
Not only that, but why it happened in the first place. And that's the best part about going to therapy, talking to you, talking to my other friends, like talking this out as, and not to make somebody else's really exciting personal change about me, but it does affect me in a way. You have to feel your feelings, right? And this made me feel sad, excited for them, but sad. Yes. And one thing that I hadn't noticed in my journaling, or it wasn't coming up this way, is, I do say like, oh, I know they view me as a neighbor and not a friend, or, oh, we're never going to talk or see each other again. And shout out to Rosie, who's like, you don't know that.
I love it.
You don't know how they think about you.
You don't
know that they're not sad about losing you next door too. You don't know that they're not going to have a loss.
I think that's really important. Don't create stories around what other people are feeling.
Yeah. Or why
through the change or why it happened.
I've been laid off before at a very small company. And it's hard not to feel like, oh, if I had done something different, had I done something better? And here, 15, 20 years in the future, me is like, oh my God, this reality is better than if I would have stayed there for 10 years. No offense, but like, I was not going to leave on my own. I was too loyal as a very young, very new employee. And I think they saw that, right? And I'm sure they let me go for many other reasons too. It had to have been a hard choice for them. But at the time, instead of embracing the change and new opportunity, and I got to take like a whole semester off of work and just live off student loans and my 401k and a severance and unemployment rate. Like I had this 6-month period where I really could have bettered myself, enjoyed myself, got some new hobbies, like did all this stuff. And instead I just sat in shame and fear and I look back and I'm thankful that happened, because now if that were to happen again, I know what to do. I've helped other people. Like I've been able to be a better support network for people going through that too, because I went through it the rough way, right? Like, and I didn't ask for help and I didn't tell people what I was feeling. So I think that's the other thing. Like you can look in your past and be like, oh God, I was never resilient. And it's like, no, that experience is informing your resiliency now, right?
Exactly. It is informing your resiliency now. I also want to talk about something when you said in my journaling, it started to come up this, and whether what you actually journaled about was a story you were telling yourself, I still like the idea that you were journaling about it, that you were writing about it. And I think that's one of the key things too, is if you can honestly and with curiosity, assess the situation. So you've stabilized, you assess the situation. And if you can write it down, so much better, because it kind of gets that swirl out of your head. But, and go all out. Like, how do I think it's going to affect me? Which I feel like you did.
So we're a business of us, right? And
right.
Changing resilience. Businesses need that. They need to have change management teams, change management plans, right?
Yep.
So especially if you know, like me, know a change is coming, you can kind of put a plan in place, right? You can
You
think about it
can.
ahead of time and reflect, or even
Yeah.
as it's happening. Because so I took this thing, I think you've done it too, at an organization. It's called Franklin Covey for Learning. Franklin is kind of the people who, the software and publisher,
Yeah.
and Covey
Mhm.
is like the Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Successful People, Stephen Covey. But they have this thing for change management, where the plan is you prepare, you learn, apply, and sustain. And then within the change itself, there are zones. And I think this is what freaks people out about change or makes them not move forward and get stuck. But you have the zone of status quo, which is where
Yep.
I am, and I'm not happy, I'm being moved. And then you have the zone of disruption, which is what I
Mhm.
see coming and I'm
Right.
anticipating and I'm making up stories. And then you have the zone of adoption, which for me, I'm going to be forced into, right? There's some change put upon us where you can just dig your heels in the ground. Don't be that person. And then if you make it through that zone of adoption, then they have the zone of better performance. So that's where you can
Nice.
do like your impact analysis, right? Like how did
Yeah.
like journal about how did this change impact me? How do I think it will? What are my lessons learned for next time, right? Like you can
Mhm.
intentionally cultivate resilience.
Well, and I think too, going back to what Dana said to you, that you can manifest it. I think you could even do like a visioning, like what would the vision after all the change has been made, what is the successful
So
vision that
you
I
mean
could
to
look
tell
at?
me if I put it in my vision board, a single Chris Evans would move in next door? Captain America himself, America's ass.
Why do you want to limit yourself to that?
I mean, but it's a big house. Gerard Butler, Jeremy Renner, all of them. If they're not in relationships right now, I welcome this to this neighborhood. I got like 5 houses to fill, and many of them could take roommates.
I like this. I say go for it.
I mean,
Why not? If you're gonna
we can create our brightly witchy commune and start, do we have any palm readers, any tarot readers, any handwriting analysis?
What's that village in Florida? Castalega or something like
Oh, I'm
that,
gonna
where
have to.
it's all witchy woo, palm readers, tarot readers, everything. Okay, let's try and get the train back on the track. Although this is a fun track to be on as well.
I think that just shows you though, like too, to like, for me, when this started, I didn't have any idea how to, like, I was just dreading the change because I was
Yeah.
sad, right? And just,
Yeah.
it's not change for me, it's change around me.
But
And
it
should I
affects
be
you.
changing? It affects me, but like, should I be changing? And I think this manifestation exercise and thinking of it like stretch goals, right? Like, and just getting the silly stuff out, because my brain's already going in the other direction of the worst of the worst. Even if I don't write
Yeah.
it down or say it, it's in there. I'm sure it is. So let's have fun with it. Get the best of the best, right?
Right. Why not make a
My
game of it?
podcast gets discovered because some big producer moves in,
Yeah.
right? Like I get published, just chit chatting with somebody
Right.
over the fence.
You
Right.
don't
And
know
then
what could happen.
no. And so thinking really big, pie in the sky fun might help ground me a little bit and be more curious in what could really happen? What do I want to really happen?
Right. Because
Without
I feel like,
expectation.
yes, I feel like that when you open yourself up to fun, you sort of, it's not like you're, pounding that sorrow or grief down, but you open yourself up to fun. And then, like you said, you're like, well, now wait a minute, let's think about this.
Yeah.
Like there are some
Bullies,
realistic
there's
cool
bigger
things.
and better coming.
Yeah. Chris, who was it? Which Chris was it?
Evans. I mean, I'll take any of them. Hemsworth.
I was gonna say this,
like
Chris
even
Evans.
Hemsworth and his whole family from Australia. I'll babysit. Like that's
or something better. Chris Hemsworth or something better.
For the greatest good, for my greatest good and the greatest good of all concerned. I'm an excellent neighbor. I have references. So I think, like you said, it just the expectation piece. Look at what is and isn't out of your control, right?
You do have to look at that. And always what's in your control is your attitude about it. But I also still want to say it's okay if you aren't feeling good about it right now. But like open yourself up to some of these things.
I mean, just embrace change as a new beginning, and beginnings are scary. And so that can, at least then you're also excited in addition to nervous, right? Like it's a beginning, it's a fresh start. I could totally I could glow up, revamp who I am as a neighbor, be the crazy lady next door, be the really hot girl. I don't know, like, who do I want to be in this new neighbor?
I don't know. Hot witch summer is coming up, Tracy.
Love it. Thanks for letting me work this out. I hope it was helpful for everybody. Well, if this episode spoke to your soul as well, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast, or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.